Round four. Round four of the unemployed guys. You know, the thing I'm getting tired of, if you come back next week, I want to switch.
Okay.
I'm getting tired of hosting.
Oh, really?
That sucks.
Thanks. That's what I did for about 20 years.
It's hard, man.
Being the number one chair. Do you want me to do it?
I just want to vibe. You want to do it? I got notes, so I can go through. But if you would like to take control, I'm sure people would love. I talked to someone this week who said, "You and Darren gonna podcast again?" I was like, "Hey, he said he's coming back."
That's right.
And they were like, "At what point are you going to let Darren start interviewing people? Because I miss Darren interviewing people." I was like, well, I think we're going to be in my backyard with a couple of microphones in our faces. I don't think we're ready to start with the interviews yet. We're still talking through stuff ourselves. But, yeah, the hosting part of it is more, even when I was doing this with Craig would host and I would just kind of vibe.
Yeah, somebody said that to me as well, because whether it was being here with you now, 4 straight weeks, or with Darnay or with Marty, in the industry, you call it who's the one chair.
Yeah.
Who sits in the one chair.
Yeah.
Somebody said, well, I kind of miss you being in the one chair. I said, well, can I just enjoy this for a little while? Because I've done the one chair thing for 20 years.
It's hard work.
And it's okay for me to take a step back for a second, and we'll see how it goes, or we'll see what it sounds like moving forward. But I don't mind a little bit of the role reversal here, where I get to sit back and just respond to you or Corey or whomever, HJ Preller. I've rather enjoyed that part of it.
Really?
I've never considered myself a great guest, but I didn't view this necessarily as me being a guest, like I'm coming here to be interviewed by you. I feel like this is just, to the point that you made to open, this is a couple of unemployed guys who have had so many years in sports media, just chopping it up, and it happens to be on your site, on your Substack. It's at your house using your equipment. So I think it'd be kind of arrogant of me to just show up here and say,
That's true.
Hey, John, I got it.
That's
Let
true.
me drive this, and you now respond to me. Maybe somewhere down the road, who knows? But will I get back into being the one chair? I guess. But I don't mind this as just a change of scenery, as a change of pace.
For what it's worth, you're a great guest.
Oh, thank you.
Because I will throw something back at you that you said to me so many years ago. I'm sure you don't remember it. It was early on in my Bolts in the Blue days, but we were already kind of friends. And I remember I got invited as a guest on someone's radio show, and I tweeted out the link to listen. And I texted you, and I was like, listen to this and tell me if I suck or not. And you, as soon as it was done, you sent me a text and you said, you do a thing that only good guests do, which is you disagreed with the host. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit. And that you made me start to think in those terms every time I was a guest, which is don't just sit here and be like, yeah, that's a great point. Think constructively, think about it from different angles. If you have a thought that disagrees with the host, don't be afraid to share it. So you've been doing that. Plus, you tell great stories.
Well, thank you. But I think what I've always worried about being a bad guest is I'm so used to being, again, that one chair, as we call it in the biz, that sometimes I feel like I just get too wordy. And instead of just... Again, I don't view now this with you and me now for 4 weeks of me being a guest. I really don't. I view this as just very conversational.
I was going to say, we were getting lunch, weekly lunch for 2 weeks before this. It's basically 6 weeks, except the last 4.
Why don't we do this on microphone?
Yeah, exactly.
But I do worry sometimes when I get invited into places, I default to being a one chair and to having other people defer to you.
Yeah.
And that I just keep talking. Because sometimes I can just keep going.
Yeah.
Right? That's the one thing that makes somebody a good one chair, is you just kind of keep going.
Yeah.
And you end up steering and dominating the conversation. So I've always worried that made me a bad guest, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it because, hey, who knows, right? Whatever the future is, if it's going to be in broadcasting, maybe the opportunity to be a one chair isn't the opportunity that's presented.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just to be a 2 or a 3. There's all sorts of roles in sports broadcasting, so trying to keep an open mind.
Yeah, and last point on this is I think that you are good enough and have strong enough takes that you can be a 1 or a 2, and you can bounce back and forth, and those are the best. That's why Marty was kind of your co-host on the Darren Smith show, but you also did the show without her plenty. Either she'd run out to Padres or Chargers or whatever. You're like, okay, I'm on my own for this 30, 40, 50 minutes. sometimes you'll get people talking about how hard it is to be solo on a show because it's just you and you got to, and that's really hard to do. And that's kind of what makes a 1, but you can also do this, which makes you a 2. Let's talk about, a 5. Jurickson Profar.
5.
I just meant he's not the number 1 on a team. He's not the number 2 on a team. He's maybe the 5th best player on a team. And on the Atlanta Braves, he's probably the 10th best 15th best player on the Braves. That's a weird question. I don't mean to make Jurickson like that.
He's a good player.
He's good.
I love Jurickson Profar. I've been proudly self-identifying as the president of the Jurickson Profar fan club for as long as he's been a Padre. I do.
So you don't like the whole thing where it's like you look at his career and he's not that guy that he was last year, but there's the other side of the coin, which is like, no, he's figured it out. He's brought it all together. You fall on the optimistic side.
I fall in the optimistic side. Plus, I also fall into the belief that some things are not measurable on the pages of Fangraphs or BaseballReference.com, and I do believe that there are intangible qualities. I believe Scott Boras once upon a time referred to that as prestige value. I don't think Jurickson Profar is a prestige value player, but I do think that he's a very emotional and spiritual type leader of a baseball team. And I do think that there is a connection to having Jurickson Profar on the Padres and seeing the Padres have some of their more successful seasons of recent memory when he's been here. I do believe in that. I do believe that there's a joy with which he plays. I do believe that there is something about him in the clubhouse. I believe that there's a respect because of the time that he spent in the big leagues, that even somebody like Manny Machado could look at Jurickson Profar and can say, that's a dude who deserves respect.
Yeah.
Remember the Will Smith incident from this past season where Will Smith said, he's a nobody.
Yeah.
We don't really register for him. We don't have a scouting report for him. And Manny's like, you got to respect a dude who's been in this game as long as Jurickson Profar. I think that's a real thing. So, I do think that, not everything is quantifiable. I know that there's been a huge shift in the sport and sports in general, that everything's got to be quantifiable. I do believe that Jurickson Profar does have those non-quantifiable characteristics that are valuable.
Also
he's been a good player now. Now maybe he has figured something out.
Also, going to the Colorado Rockies and not being good or living up to expectations is every story of every person that goes to the Colorado Rockies, essentially.
Right. Whatever happened to Chris Bryant? Injuries,
God,
I get it.
What did happen to Chris
Colorado
Bryant?
Rockies happened to him.
That's brutal. I actually forgot about him. But
yeah, I mean, listen, that sounds like a lot of money for Jurickson Profar. There was a reason why he was available for $1 million a year ago.
But then he was an all-star.
Mm-hmm.
And after the season, I heard everyone saying, $13 million sounds about right. What did he get, 15, 14 a year?
Somewhere in that range, 42, I think
42?
was the total deal for 3 years?
Yeah. That's,
somewhere in that range, which was definitely probably great connection. It sounds like it was beyond the budget for what the Padres were willing to do.
I'll give you the quote from Profar. Obviously, the Padres have some issue with the ownership when talking about why the Padres didn't match this deal. He made it sound like had the Padres matched, he would have come home, but they can't because they have issues with ownership, which I'm sure we will get into. But just this, everyone was waiting for Roki Sasaki, and everything turned on Roki Sasaki. And as soon as he signed with the Dodgers, it was like, okay, fine, go get Profar. And now Profar is not there. The Padres have made, in the month of January, which is about to end, a single move that was not signing a player to a minor league contract. Are you familiar with this move?
In the month of January, that was not a minor league contract.
It was in the last few days.
Let's see. Maldonado wouldn't count.
No, minor league.
Wade was already... I don't...
They made a trade. They traded cash considerations to the Chicago White Sox for a relief pitcher named Ron I mean, he's my Italian brother. I should not screw up his name. Marinaccio?
Okay.
Marinaccio. Who...
didn't register.
No. I mean, they traded cash for him. But I looked at the numbers. He's got a high upside. I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the Preller finds where it's like, wow, they found this really good relief arm and gave up nothing for him.
General managers of the Padres have been doing that since Petco Park opened in 2004.
Forever. Who's your favorite one?
Scott Linebrink. Clay Meredith.
I was going to say
Mike Adams.
Heath
Bell. You can go down the list of these relatively anonymous relievers who came from some other organization for something and turn themselves into some sort of asset that ended up being flipped and traded for some other better player.
I wouldn't be surprised. So Preller still has so many moves to make. You can't pencil in Profar at left field anymore. Now that the Profar thing is done, I've seen people bring Ha-Seong Kim's name back up. I don't see how that's a thing that they can do. Because right now, if you believe that Arias can be your first baseman, which I hate, but they have bigger priorities, right? Then your infield is done outside of catcher. Mm-hmm. You got to focus on left field, starting catcher, starting rotation, I think.
DH.
And DH, yeah. Which, I'm not going to say DHs are easier to find than left fielders, but they seem easy to find. You don't need the defense tool, the speed tool, the throwing tool. They just got to be able to hit.
And you might have that guy in Luis Ariz, depending on what else is available out there in free agency. Right?
Exactly, yeah. You find a first baseman, then Luis Ariz can be your hitter. He has a hit tool, even if he doesn't have a power tool.
Yes. He's got what the front offices like to refer to as positional versatility, in that he can either play first base or be a DH.
There was a guy I was messing with. We might talk about AI later because I don't know if you know this. The stock market is like basically crashing today because of some interesting AI news.
Yeah, I got up and I saw something on Blue Sky that said, "Do not look at your portfolio today."
Do not look at your portfolio.
So I am not going to look at my portfolio today, John. Do not do this to me. Do not put me in a bad mood. I'm having a good Monday.
You know what's funny? While I was waiting for you out in front of the house, I was pulling up my portfolio. That's what I was going to look at, and that's when I found the empty bullet casing in front of my house, and I was like, well, now I've gotten distracted. I don't need to look at my portfolio anymore. But
these are the tough streets of Carlsbad.
Yeah. I was messing around with AI this morning, and I'm like, what's a question that I have that I would like AI to try and solve for me? And so I was asking AI, like, what should the Padres do? They still have gaps in their roster. There's about, a month or so before spring training really kicks in. What should the Padres do? And funny enough, AI actually pointed me in the direction of the Baltimore Orioles, who have some guy on the bench who's like a DH/outfielder, former number 2 pick overall, who has like all the potential in the world to just be a hitter who hits bombs, although I think his career high is like 13, but just a really good hitter. Weird name that I'm not going to remember. And they were like, and AI was like, the Padres should trade for this guy. Because
AI said that.
Yeah. They were like, he could fill the hole in the outfield. He can help them at the DH. He's a left-handed hitter, which they got, Manny and Tatis are righties. And they were like, this is the guy the Padres should target. And I was like, I'm going to bring that up on the podcast. I should go find his name.
Well, I give you credit for actually making sure that you're crediting AI, because that sounds like the kind of thing a lot of people would have just stolen for themselves and said, listen to me, I'm so much smarter. I actually have in-depth knowledge of the Baltimore Orioles roster and who might be available here and who might be an extra piece from Baltimore. So that way, if it happens somewhere down the road, John, you could take a victory lap and say, see, this is what I said on week 4 of the Unemployed Guys podcast.
The funny thing is people are only half listening anyway, so if Heston Kierstad,
get it on the record.
With a J, so he must be like Dutch or something.
Mm-hmm. Sounds
like,
right.
Kjerstad. Now it's on the record. So if he ends up coming to the Padres or just being a superstar, someone's going to be like, I remember Gennaro telling me about that guy.
You'll put this on your Instagram reel, and you'll say, hey, remember when it was that I said this back on January 27th, I think it is.
I don't really do Instagram reels.
But this could be your moment.
Yeah.
This could be your moment. It doesn't stop anybody else from putting everything out there on Instagram. So
That's
take a victory lap if it happens.
That's true.
Credit AI.
AJ Preller's job was, we talked about it last week, nearly impossible. Now it feels like it's even harder. I'm actually wondering if there's, because it's Preller, I'm wondering if there's some big thing coming that we're all going to be shocked by. And I don't mean like a free agent signing for a lot of money. I think that's gone out the window. But, there's talk about, I was reading an article this morning of like, hey, the Padres, in addition to the Dylan Cease, Luis Ariz trade conversations, are also bringing up Michael King. Now, trading any one of those guys would be a big deal, but not like a seismic deal. I was wondering if Preller's going to pull a, you know what, maybe we'll trade Tatis to, I don't know, the Yankees or something and bring back like 3 good, not, bad example, but you get my point. I wondered if he was going to take one of the superstars, because all of these guys, in addition to having no trade clauses, have contracts that no one would want.
I think people would want Tatis's contract.
That's the only one.
Yeah.
They won't take Bogarts. They won't take Manny. They would take Merrill because he's got the rookie deal. And I was like, I wonder if he's going to try and flip his big chip, which I'm assuming Tatis would be his biggest chip that he actually could flip for something.
Can we rewind, though, one quick second here
Absolutely.
just to put a bow on Profar? Because I know the commentary got a lot of run around local media. And if I were still doing a radio show, I probably would have given that a lot of run, right? Credit to whomever it was that found that. I saw it because Jim Russell brought it up. Jim Russell from 760 brought it up.
Wait, what are we talking about?
The Profar line where he's on a video Zoom with the Atlanta Braves media and says, hey, the Padres ownership thing. Like,
oh, yeah.
Because instantly that became a referendum on the lawsuit.
Of course.
But I think what you're saying right there, to me, logically points to a bigger picture issue, which is the overall financing of the Padres, whether the lawsuit was public or not. Because you just said there's now conversations, even Kevin Acey over the weekend, who wrote, hey, Padre fans, step off the ledge. Things are much better than they used to be, and it's only January, and January doom and gloom seems misplaced, blah, 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 blah. But in the same story, he references that the organization might have to trade Dylan Cease or Luis Arraez. You just brought up Michael King.
Yep, I saw it on Trade
Which seems
Rumors.
like a newer name, right, on MLB Trade Rumors?
Yeah.
Is that where it was today?
Yeah.
Okay. So an organization that still might have to trade one of those pieces, to me, is not an organization that was going to shell out $42 million for Jurickson Profar.
Oh, exactly.
And somewhere in my phone, I do have a text from somebody from a couple of months ago, and this is all very ambiguous and not intended to make me sound any more important than I am as an unemployed person podcasting with John. But I do have a text from somebody there who's like, hey, if it's going to be in the neighborhood of $40 million, that ain't going to, it's just not going to work. Jurickson Profar was a Padre last year because he was available for $1 million.
$1 million. There's no other way he's on that team.
If he was $42 million Jurickson
wouldn't have happened.
Profar a year ago, Jurickson Profar would have been playing for a different organization.
Yeah.
So, again, people are entitled to think what they want to think about the timing of the lawsuit from John Seidler, which I know you and I will chat about here in a little bit.
Yeah.
We both have some thoughts on that. But an organization that's still sitting around thinking about trading Dylan Cease or Luis Arraez or Michael King is not an organization that is going to go sign Jurickson Profar for $42 million. That just doesn't make any sense. And the second part of that is, if you have these three players in particular, those three guys, right, seem like the most likely trade chips that the Padres have, right?
Because they
have expiring contracts after 2025.
And they don't have no trade clauses.
Correct. But wouldn't that give you the indication? I mean, wouldn't that signal to you that this should more be an all-in type situation because those players are likely to walk at the end of this season?
Yeah.
Dylan Cease is going to free agency. He's represented by Scott Boras.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about Michael King, but his representation, they're not a bunch of slappies. I think it's CAA in Los Angeles. But we know more about Michael King because he's willing to go to arbitration over $1.5 million difference. Something that's never happened with A.J. Preller. And
about that.
Arraez is a player who's been traded 3 straight years, right? So, there's all sorts of debate about Arraez. I think he's in a little bit of a different category. I'll be really, really interested to see what sort of free agent deal Luis Arraez gets. But the point is, these are 3 guys, John, that are going to be free agents at the end of 2025, unless the Padres do something that nobody expects them to do, sign them new extensions.
Yeah.
That's, I think, as unlikely as signing Jurickson Profar for $42 million. So what that says to me isn't like, we'll figure out a way to start trading. It's like, why don't you support that? And if you have to take a step back as an organization, do it at the end of 2025. Do it at the end of 2025. You have the bones of a 93-win team here with these players who are going to go to free agency because the money's too good for them not to go to free agency. So why wouldn't you try to build something supportive of this really, really unique roster that you have? Because you're not going to have it next year, and I don't really understand all the conversation to the contrary.
Yeah, I don't remember if I said this last week or the week before, but I know I said it to you. It feels like, I'm not going to say like the bad times or the old times, it just feels like what being a Padres fan was like before Peter Seidler not just bought the team, but before Peter Seidler bought the team and then overcame cancer that first time and all of a sudden got more involved and took control and pushed Ron Fowler out of the way a little bit. Everything before that was like, we have a good player. He's going to be a free agent. We got to get something for him. There was never a consideration of, can we sign him long term? And like, honestly, the first player that I can remember, I remember they were like, we're going to start signing our young players to long-term contracts. And they did it with Nick Hundley and Corey Lupke and maybe someone else.
Yeah, that sounds right. Corey Lupke. I remember that.
And maybe someone else. It was like the same offseason. They were like, we're pushing our chips in on these guys. And all of them were terrible.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they're never doing that again. And they
Lupke got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
maybe Jed Jerko was in that kind of conversation,
but
right?
then they ended up having to trade him to the Cardinals because they were like, we can't afford this guy anymore. And it was just a lot of, we're not playing the same game as the other teams. This is what makes people mad when the Dodgers can just sign whoever at any point, because we're not playing the same financial game as them. And we're back to that place because for a little while it felt like we are. Like, oh, you want Manny Machado? Well, we can play that game too.
Yep.
You want Bryce Harper? We can get at that table too. We got and now it's back to, this guy's so good that we got to trade him before he walks. And that's what hurts, because that's what makes you feel like there's never going to be another. And granted, they still have Tatis, they still have Manny for many, many years, but it makes you feel like there's never going to be another Tony Gwynn, like an all-star level player who's here for his entire career or most of it.
But even some of those circumstances, though, are different, right? Whomever it is, when the Padres traded away Adrian Gonzalez, God, I hated that. I just hated everything about that.
I'm glad you did.
You didn't? I loved Adrian. Adrian was one of my favorite dudes. Jake Peavy trading him away. The circumstances were so much different because the Padres knew that they probably weren't going to be a good team, and nor were they coming off a 93-win season.
Right.
You're coming off a 93-win season where if you didn't completely choke in the batter's box, you could have gotten through the Dodgers. And to me, there's nothing about that circumstance from then to present day that suggests that you should dismantle this thing. I understand that Profar has priced himself out, but why not give it a run with Cease and give it a run with Arise and give it a run with King and let the chips fall where they may at the end of this year? And if you have to backtrack a little bit, I know we talked about this also. Everybody always has to think like a general manager. Well, you're going to let these guys walk for nothing? How'd that work with Blake Snell? How'd that work with Josh Hader? Hey, at the time, I didn't like just completely unplugging. The Padres missed the playoffs by one game in 2023. They won 93 games in 2024. They were a game away from getting through the Dodgers.
I know.
And all you keep hearing is, well, you're going to have to trade one of these guys. And I just don't know where that's coming from, other than people starting to fret too much about these guys leaving in free agency. To me, it just screams the opposite, which is build it while you have it and see if you can make a legitimate run with it. Now, people will point at Soto, and I understand. Everything went well, but I just would rather, I don't want to say double down, it's not the right word. I would just rather to build around the bones of a 93-win team that I still have here while I still have it. And if you got to take a huge step back after 2025, then so be it. I think everybody will go, hey, there will be the expected belly aching about the way things are going. But, then maybe you take the opportunity to wipe the slate a little bit clean and start thinking through some other stuff.
So I'm saying, the trade deadline's in 6 months. Like, you got 6 months? What? Like, I don't understand. Like, Michael King is the one out of these three guys. Like, Dylan Cease, you could convince me that they should not extend Dylan Cease.
Sure.
You could convince me that...
I just don't think you can. I mean, I just don't think that's even a possibility.
Right. No, but just, we're talking about a different team now, right? Like a different team with money. If a different team with money was like, I don't know if I want to pay Cease that money, he's a little inconsistent, playoffs and whatever, you could convince me of that. Luis Arise, you want to convince me that type of player is not worth whatever money he's going to demand from the market? Sure, you got an argument there. Michael King is the one. Michael King is like Adrian Gonzalez all over again, just on a much smaller scale of like, there is no fucking... If Peter Seidler was alive, Michael King would be extended right now. And instead, they're like, I might need to shop him so we can clear $8 million off the books. Like,
going to go to arbitration with him.
It's brutal, man.
Going to potentially sour this relationship over $1.5 million. The Peter Seidler Padres always avoided that. If anything, they sort of sweetened the pot a little bit because
so that they didn't have to. Yeah.
So they wouldn't have to. So they could maybe turn to somebody like Josh Hader or Blake Snell and say, "Hey, could you give us, like we want to have a good relationship with you here, and now it just seems to be something completely different. So I
This
don't know.
was
I mean,
always my argument.
I just don't understand that logic. The logic of everything is great, but you're still gonna have to trade one of these centerpieces from a 93 win team in 2024. Like it just doesn't add up to me.
This was always my argument, and I'll give you something that I don't know if it's super well known. I think I said it on Padres Hot Tub at the time, but I thought that Preller and Seidler were trying to tell all the players in baseball that we are going to take care of you. Don't worry about arbitration. Just give us your number, and if we think it's fine or close to fine, we're going to pay it. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. The players are empowered here. Manny and Tatis, I think, were the ones, or maybe Manny and Hosmer, that said, we think we should go get Nelson Cruz. They went and they got Nelson Cruz. I told Craig years ago, I was like, they are trying to build a culture that reverberates around the league and says, this team takes care of its players. And I have a friend who works for the Padres who said that Peter came in at one point and said, if any player requests any sort of equipment for the gym, for recovery, for anything, buy it. I don't want an analysis. I don't want an approval. I don't want to. Is there other players who are going to buy it? And that actually happened to coincide with, I think that was the James Shields cryogenic thing that he brought in. But I've heard stories about players coming in and going like, I saw this thing on Instagram. This guy was using this thing to work out, and I thought that'd be really cool. And like the Padres, like, cool, it'll be in the gym next week. And it was just such a culture of we will take care of the players. That is how we will compete, right? Players will want to come here. And now it's, again, back to the old days where it's like, we can't afford that, guys, with the San Diego Padres. And, maybe this is the transition into.
But I don't think though that was limited to just the player experience. Peter, to your point about what you have heard in what his approach was to players' wants and desires, Peter's approach was, we want to be best in class.
They took the entire team to a playoff series in like St. Louis or something like that. I remember hearing
that's the phrase that I always heard: best in class. We want to be best in class. And as that related to the players and the clubhouse and the equipment, it sounds like you caught a seed of something here that seems to fit into that category. I've heard it in different departments that the Padres, as most professional sports teams and college teams now, they have their own marketing arm, right?
Sure.
And a lot of that is producing content. And when they wanted a state-of-the-art camera to produce some of the content, whether it was for the video board or whether it was for the stuff that you would see on Padres.com, and they didn't go to Craigslist to find video cameras. They got the top-of-the-line equipment, and Peter would sign off on all of that stuff. So, it wasn't just about making sure that the players had, we hear all these stories from all these athletes that, that they have barbers brought in and their cars get detailed and equipment and dry cleaning, right? They want to make their lives as simple as possible so that they can spend as much time focusing on the baseball or the football or whatever. It wasn't just that. I mean, it was across the board. People that work there would tell you, like, if we needed something, if we wanted something, we were never afraid to ask. And we would usually get sign off on this sort of stuff, whether it was equipment that we needed for marketing or whether it was equipment that we needed for whatever, whether it was the ballpark, the feel of the ballpark, everything was going to be best in class because that's how Peter Seidler said we were going to run the Padres organization.
Right. And to transition, that seems like a thing that was Peter's focus, and Peter being the head of the organization, it was then the organization's focus. Peter's not here anymore, and he's not the head of the organization anymore. And part of that best in class thing was Peter knowing, hey, if I got to reach down into the bottom of my pocket and pull out an extra, $500,000 to make this thing best in class, whether that's the content team, the gym, whatever, I can do that. I don't know that they have owners that can do that anymore. Like, I was reading AC's thing about Shiel Seidler this morning, the very long, in-depth I talked to a million employees thing that AC put out. And he mentioned that, John Seidler has been an engineer for 25 years, and he's got a tiny little sliver of ownership of the Padres already. And I was like, if someone goes to John Seidler and goes, hey, the marketing team needs new cameras, is he going to go, just tell him to buy whatever and I'll sign off on it? No, of course he's not, because he's not a billionaire hedge fund manager who operates that way. And I mean, I don't want to jump ahead about all my thoughts on it, but it just, the Peter Seidler, the real bummer about Peter's death is that we lost him. The other bummer about Peter's death is that until the end of time, we're going to compare our Padres, the current day Padres, the current ownership of Padres, to him and the team that he built and the organization that he ran. And I don't know that that's a comparison that is ever going to work out positively for us.
And that's the worst part too. Like you said, he's not here, and he's not here to separate fact from fiction on a lot of this stuff. Where it's you can, dead people don't speak, man. Like, so you have a lot of people that seem to be speaking on his behalf. I read this long AC piece, and you read it a couple of times, and listen, I don't doubt that Kevin does the work. I don't doubt that he spoke with 20 different sources in and out of the organization. Some people work there, some people don't, right? Paraphrasing here. This is me just paraphrasing. And, I think Kevin does a lot of the work. But, there are a couple of things that I thought were easy to object to.
I got some.
Well, I'll read it because I actually have it queued up here. This is from Kevin Acee. 2 lower-level Padre employees who work supporting players and staff estimate that John Seidler attended several dozen games this past season. That was, they said, far more than Shiel Seidler. A third employee in a similar position said, quote, I haven't really seen her until this past year. And I just think Kevin should know better than that. Yeah. I think Kevin should know better than that, because I would tell you that 100%, almost 100% of my interactions with Shiel Seidler came at Petco Park.
Of course.
And I'm there a fraction of the time that Kevin is. So, how is it that I have this perception in my mind that Shiel Seidler was there on a really regular basis? The first time that I ever met Peter Seidler was 2015, 14, 15, somewhere in that range. And I'll just set it up from memory here off the top of my head. Remember the old county supervisor, Ron Roberts? Ron Roberts was an elected official in San Diego. He was a county supervisor. He was really involved in a lot of the Chargers conversations about city money, county money, all that sort of stuff. Ron Roberts always found himself at a sporting event. You would always see him at a baseball game or a San Diego State basketball game or a Charger game or what have you. So, he very much was very visible if you were following sports while Ron Roberts was an elected official. And I was just chatting with him on the field at Petco Park and hey, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. He walked away, and a couple seconds later he came back. He's like, hey, Peter Seidler. Peter Seidler, he's one of the minority owners of the Padres because Ron Fowler was still the control person.
At that point, they were known as the O'Malley Group.
Right. He says, Peter Seidler wants to meet you. And he saw us talking, and, he asked if he could introduce us. I'm like, of course. So, here comes Peter, and, Peter was just his own unique self. And we just got to, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, God, have I said anything about this guy? Is this guy going to air me out, right? Because I'm on the field at Petco Park, which usually, as you know, when you have a credential, you're like, you never know.
It's a vulnerable position to be in.
Yeah, and some people will take that opportunity of saying, hey, I heard that thing you said, you fucking asshole. So, he did not. He's like, I listen all the time. He's like, I got to introduce you to my wife. He's like, Shiel. And Shiel was involved in a different conversation. He's like, come over here, And here comes Shiel. And she's like, this is Darren Smith.
Yeah.
And I'm like feeling really kind of, awkward. Like, what if she heard something? Because sometimes, right, the wives hear the things that you object.
I like you can't even get the ego boost out of it because you're so freaked out.
I'm like, is she going to air me out if I said something, And, then I had like the typical line, like, sorry, your husband probably bores you with all the sports talk. She's like, no, like we drive around, we listen all the time.
Sure.
So like, my point is that, I'm not there every day. Right. I don't know how many meetings she was involved with. And, Kevin seems to do a good job of chronicling a lot of people's different experiences. I'm just telling you that it was my experience, and I know the experiences of a lot of other people, that she was around Petco Park a lot. Like that to me is one of the parts of this that I just does not check out. It does not check out for me that she just sort of popped onto the scene. I think you can, at least in my view of it, John, is, you can say that about the brother Seidler. I mean, I would love to ask Kevin. I guess Kevin will be on radio at some point.
Wait, do you have the article pulled up right now?
I do. But, somebody should say, Kevin, have you ever seen John Seidler around there? What would you say happened more, that you would see Shield Seidler or that you would see John Seidler? Yeah. Because, again, just my view of it, and I'm there a fraction of the time that Kevin was, and I'm not there anymore because I'm not credentialed. But my experience was the complete opposite of that. That shocks me, and I feel like Kevin should probably know better than that is the opinion of two lower-ranking Padre officials who sound like clubhouse attendants.
That's what I was going to say.
Where Shield Seidler shouldn't be anyway.
Right. She stays out of the clubhouse. That would make sense if he's talking to people in the clubhouse, because that's where he is, talking to the players and the coaches.
Supporting players and staff estimated. I mean, that sounds very much like people who are behind the scenes. But
and people who she shouldn't. But I thought it was hilarious, because I read that, and I was like, really? I don't know if I buy this, like John was there. And then I'm scrolling around. The article has pictures of Shield throwing out the first pitch, pictures of Shield at the stadium, pictures of Tom Seidler at the stadium, no pictures of John Seidler. Why aren't there pictures of him at a Padres game if he attended so many more than Shield Seidler, who they photographed all the time? And granted, she's standing next to Peter, but you imagine John, maybe the future control person of the Padres, would probably be standing near Peter too in those situations.
It is so obvious to me that they were close, not just from my own experiences there, which might just be unique to me, but I don't think so. I think you can ask Marty, who I spent a ton of time with, who's there a ton at Petco. I know had seen Shield a lot. I know that they neither one of them did a ton on social media. But I've seen pictures of Peter and Shield at a World Baseball Classic game.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've seen images of them. I've never seen it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I've never seen Peter post pictures of himself and his brothers at a sporting event, but I know I've seen that. Now this is anecdotal. Like this isn't about the way this is all going to shake out, because I know, I suspect that it's probably that this is going to be pretty cut and dried and a matter of what is or isn't like the legal pathway for people to take.
I don't think she's
but I just think some of that stuff, I'll give you another one, just if you don't mind.
Wait, can I give you one?
Because I just think like this has been an interesting week of like what's going on here as it relates to Shield. Let me read this. This was a Jeff Sanders story. Jeff wrote a story about Jurickson Profar. And what it was that Profar said when he had a conversation with the Atlanta media. And he said what he said that you read a little bit earlier about, about the ownership situation. Because this is what you call, you're a former writer, so you know what a kicker is. This is a kicker at the end of a story. It says the current opening day projection is at, 196.9 million. They need a replacement here. They need to replace Musgrove. They need some catching help. And then the final paragraph of the story. Complicating matters, Shield Seidler, the widow of former Padre chairman Peter Seidler, has sued her brothers-in-law to contest control of the team. And I thought, is that complicating matters in free agency? Is it? Like, the phrase causation or correlation comes into my mind. Is it causation or is it correlation? Because to me, it feels like correlation.
That's why I thought the article was written in a way to be like, hey, the ownership turmoil is what really screwed up this Profar thing. And I'm like, no, the fact that they don't have money is what screwed up the Profar thing, and they don't want to pay the tax is what screwed up the Profar thing. I want to say a couple things. One, I think legally, Shield's cooked. Like, you can be Team Shield all you want, but legally she's cooked. One, as a moment to step back and teach people how to read Kevin Acee, there was a paragraph in there that felt very sourced by Ron Fowler because it mentioned Ron Fowler.
Yeah.
And it was like, Shield Seidler has never shown up at any of the Padres ownership meetings where Ron Fowler and others have attended. Talked to someone, they said, nope, she's never there. And then they went into this whole thing about, she was like, well, I would go to the MLB meetings with him, but for the Padre meetings, I'd kind of stay in the back. That was the agreement we had. Where was the line about where John or Matt or Bob were in these were they in the ownership meetings? If they were like, Shield wasn't there, but John Seidler attended every meeting and was up to date on every single thing to do, that would be an argument. They don't mention him. They just mention that no one saw her at these. And I was like, that is such a half-truth.
Yeah.
Where they're like, I'm going to give you this half-truth. I'm not going to tell you the rest of it. And that drove me crazy. And my two final things. One, I wrote on the bottom of this, like, they can't turn this around. They got to sell this. They can't turn it around. But the other thing is, Shield is obviously kind of getting screwed here. She's getting a little bit screwed by the brothers. She's honestly getting a little bit screwed by Peter.
She's being that's why I bring up the different things that are being said here. It feels like she's being scapegoated here because the Padres may have to trade one of these players who we've already referenced them because they couldn't sign Profar, which they weren't going to do anyway.
Yeah, but I don't know if you feel comfortable with this. No one's talking about this. There is a Seidler brother who's been around. He's around all the time. What's going on with Tom? Why was Tom not in the succession plan? Why was Tom not thought of to be the control person of the team? Why is Shield feeling like she got pushed out by the trust, but Tom seems fine with it? I have a theory. I have conjecture. I have rumor, but I don't have an actual reason. But, like, to me, if I was a player half following this, I'd be like, wait. Which brother? John? What about Tom? Yeah. Tom's there all the time.
Guy's pretty much been here since the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and
do you know the rumors I'm referring to?
I don't. I mean, I can just tell you my experiences with Tom have always been positive.
Yeah.
He's been a guest on the show. Always a nice guy in and around the ballpark to me.
Yeah.
I don't know where he is in this conversation. I suspect he's probably with the brothers here, but one of the things that I always heard, because it's not like Peter, people knew that Peter was unwell, and people knew, even if his death came as a surprise because it was unrelated to some of the bigger picture stuff that Peter had dealt with in his life, there were people that were saying, well, what does happen, and what about Tom? And it just was sort of speculated that Tom didn't have any interest in doing this sort of thing, or that Tom just wasn't cut from the cloth that would be the likely candidate to succeed Peter Seidler.
Yeah. And I don't, look, I'm not going to, it's a fucking free podcast. I'm not going to tease people like this. My experience with Tom is one time, and it was after a Padres game, a win, an afternoon win, I think a weekend afternoon win. And I met Tom. I was with someone else. They introduced me. Tom, this is John. John, this is Tom. We chatted for a few minutes, and he walked away. And the person who introduced me, who I'm not going to out, I looked at them, and I was like, is he drunk? And the person looked at me and nodded and said, usually. Now, granted, I don't know that person was spitting facts. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's true. That was their opinion, and that's my one experience with him. And it was after a Padres game, and I was probably drunk too.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm not casting any sort of judgment or anything like that. But when every time I look at this, I'm like, Tom is the brother who's around. Why is he not being given even like a voice in this? Let Tom be the one to be like, hey, guys, you know me. I've been around. You see my face, all that stuff. John's the right call here. Like, and granted, maybe that's the wrong move because all the Shield people will be mad at him. Or maybe he goes, hey, I'm with Shield, or I'm staying out of this, or something. But it's just like, yeah, Tom's the brother who's around, but he's not a part of this at all. We're going to push him to the side so we can keep running military campaigns or whatever he does.
Yeah, and he's a community relations guy.
Yeah.
That's a big job with the Padres.
Yeah.
That is like a real gig. And people that I know that have worked in his department have always spoke very highly of him. See, I've heard the exact opposite. I've heard that Tom actually wasn't a drinker.
Really?
So, yeah, but I don't know that. I do not know that because, I am a drinker.
Yeah.
And for me,
Same.
My wife works in the wine business, so it's something, that's part of my conversation. So just in terms of being able to carry on a casual conversation that maybe isn't about baseball.
Yeah.
I always tucked that away, that I was under the impression that Tom was not a drinker.
Could be.
So it was not something that I was going to bring up. Shield Seidler obviously is not a drinker. I don't think Peter was a drinker. So I think they may have in the past, but I think
because they were like crunchy granola yoga hippies, right?
Right. And I think some of them, have even admitted to having their own personal demons with alcohol.
Sure.
So, again, I don't have this all memorized or put right in front of me.
Yeah.
I just, I think that there's, I just seem to think that that's part of that conversation. But yeah, I think it sort of was generally accepted consensus was, this is not what Tom wants to do. Like, he doesn't really want to do that sort of stuff. And it's not for everybody. I think if you were to ever track down Eric Gazzenda, like second, third hand, he would tell you that he probably didn't have an amazing experience being the point person for the Padres for 2024. I don't think he really liked the fact that he was a meme. I don't think he really liked the fact that it became a term, cut spenda instead of Gazzenda, right? So I don't think that experience was one that he really wanted. But, he did it for his friend. And I think that, he should be appreciated for stepping in, because what were the alternatives then? It seemed like it just delayed the inevitable, which is why we're having this conversation today in 2025.
Yeah.
But, I think it all just speaks to what I suspect and what others have suspected as well, that at some point over some timeline, this likely results in a sale. I just don't think baseball really, baseball doesn't like this. And, I think if you're going to be approved as a point person, you're going to have to do it on baseball's terms.
Yeah.
Especially right now, especially when there's uncertainty about where this is all heading in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Peter was a true disruptor of the system. And I don't know the baseball loved that. I think what Shield represents, and like I say Team Shield, not because I think that legally she's got a lot of firm ground to stand on to be the control person of the Padres.
Sure.
You can speak to this better than I.
Sure.
Since this literally is your wife's work.
Yeah.
Your wife's work, not your life's work.
Yes.
But, just even people that I know that have worked for teams and work with Major League Baseball, they will tell you, like, everything has got to be pretty locked down in terms of how it is that you operate. And there's not going to be a lot of wiggle room here. Just because Shield might represent the spirit of Peter better than anybody else, in my opinion, and the opinions of a lot of other people. Just because Shield represents the moral standing of Peter Seidler, in my opinion, better so than these brothers who may or may not have spent a couple of games at Petco Park.
Great way of putting it.
Doesn't mean that is what legally is going to happen here.
Yeah.
I just think what I object to is what feels to me to be a bit of a campaign against her.
Yeah.
And a little bit of a scapegoating of her. I mean, I could reference, I mentioned some of the UT stuff. There also is an executive from Odyssey, which is the parent company of the Padres flagship radio station, 97.3.
Is it still Mike D?
It is not.
Okay.
Although Mike D was in the news today, he got a new job.
Good for him.
There is a fellow whose name I do not know. His name is Michael Valenzuela. This is a since deleted tweet or X or whatever, in which, for whatever reason, he was responding to a fan. And responding to a fan on
don't read the comments
on Twitter, who said something about the Padres. What was the point that the original post was? The Players Association should file a grievance over the fact that a disinterested control person is being rammed in the cut payroll outside of the wishes of the primary owner. Right. So that was the initial post, okay. And this executive from Odyssey, again, it's since deleted. Nobody can talk. Nothing has changed. For all you know, it could come out there's no merit to her claims. We do know players are not signing with us because of the questions in ownership, and that falls on her and the timing of this litigation.
Do you think he's just a Padres fan?
Well, I mean, this is an executive at Odyssey, and he claims to be a Padre fan.
That's a tweet from a Padre fan, but
sounds like it. Again, like when you sort of click on this person and go, well, who is this? And you click on the person's bio and you see that this is some sort of official capacity person at Odyssey. I'm not trying to be Scott Kaplan here, and say that the local flagship radio station has been completely locked down, because I don't know that is true. But you just sort of, that's what I object to. I object to what appears to be, John, a couple of days before Padre Fan Fest, some sort of campaign against Shield or some sort of scapegoating of her, that Jurickson Profar, who was never going to sign here anyway, somehow got driven away, and that Roki Sasaki made his decision to go with the Dodgers, which had been suspected for months on end because of something that you can interpret literally and figuratively through his introductory press conference about the Dodgers having a really, really stable front office, right? Like, I think that feels like a reach to me, but that's just my 2 cents on it.
I think it's a reach. I'm going to try.
And I do object to that because I think, like I said, she more so than anybody else that I'm aware of embodies the spirit of Peter Seidler as much or more so than anybody else that I certainly can name.
No, but you've hit on a point that actually has nothing to do with Shield or even the Padres, which is, and this is the thing, God, it's going to take us back so many years, a thing we've been talking about forever and ever and ever and probably will, which is there's one paper in this town. So there's one sports department in this town. Now, there are people like us who are talking on podcasts or people that will occasionally blog about the Padres, but there is one sports department. And if you want to call the Fan a sports department, go ahead. But the Fan are essentially, I'm not going to say owned by the Padres, but they need the Padres to exist.
They're partners.
They're partners, so they need the Padres to be happy. And the UT is not, they have a history of this, of picking a side and pushing that side. And we saw this with Soccer City, right?
Yep.
How many SDSU friendly articles did we read and go, it's complete bullshit. It's complete bullshit. But there's not a person writing another article on the other side going, hey, actually, Soccer City's good. And here's why the yes. No, one side of the argument, we're going to push until we win. And, like, honestly, looking back at it, like, Soccer City, those guys, I'm pretty sure they thought, like, we have the better plan. We've Landon Donovan. We got MLS in our back pocket. We're doing all the right things. We're going to win. And SDSU was like, you guys don't know this fucking town.
Right.
And that's what's so infuriating about it is that, like, most sports fans, they just want to hear the truth. And the UT is like, hey, who are we siding with here? Okay, our sources want us to push this.
I don't know,
Let's
though,
push
John.
that.
I mean, I feel like I've seen a bit of finger pointing at Shield throughout this from again, not just reporters who I've already referenced here, right? Because their stuff has been public. I know that I'm reading something that has been deleted, but still put it out there.
It's public.
I'm not the only person
Stuff
that's
you put on the internet never actually does.
Yep, and but I have seen a bit of I've seen people scapegoat Jurickson Profar, right? Like, well, how could he do this to us? He just went and took the money. Like, he should have taken a lot less to stay here. Like, how much less do you think the Padres could have offered him? I don't know.
What does he owe us?
Like, people like, oh, great timing for the lawsuit, but hashtag Team Shield, right? So, I do think that there is, that there has been a little bit of that out there. So, I don't think it's that. I think people are, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm just giving you mine.
Yeah.
And I feel really, really comfortable in saying all the things that I'm saying here.
Yeah.
For reasons of logic and also for just kind of being there and kind of seeing it and also understanding how things work.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be clear, like, I like Kevin. Like Kevin has checked in on me as much as anybody.
I also like Kevin.
And, but I do think sometimes Kevin's piece over the weekend about, why is everybody so upset about what's going on in January? There's a lot of moves coming. Payroll's going to be near the top 10 and all this other sort of stuff. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Eric Grupner saying, can you imagine if you woke up from a coma and you saw that, the Padres, it had that same tone to it, didn't it? And I think sometimes, you go, okay, you're obviously speaking to people who don't want to be quoted on the record.
Yeah.
Who was quoted on the record in that story? Shield was. And then you had a bunch of anonymous quotes from a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Some of whom, according to Kevin, were fearful of retribution, whatever that means.
She said it too. Because he was like, how come no one's supporting your claims? And she was like, because they've been told not to and they're afraid of losing their job.
And I suspect, though, most people think Kevin is probably at least somebody who will do the work, that maybe people don't want to talk to Kevin because, they suspect or maybe worry that he has aligned himself, right, with with, like I said, the tone of that piece just reminded me a lot of Eric Grupner's Imagine Waking Up from a Coma, and you have Manny Machado and Xander Bogaerts and Yu Darvish, right? You wouldn't be complaining, would you? Yeah. And Kevin's tone was very much the tone of, well, do you remember what it was like 15 years ago? like this place sucked, right? So, it had that tone to it, and maybe it's a coincidence, but maybe not.
That's what I'm saying. Like the one of the bummers about losing Peter is just the idea that we're always going to compare what we have now to what we had then. Are things better now than they were 15 years ago? Sure. Are they worse than they were 5 years ago? Yes. Like it's that's just a fact. All right.
And I still think like I said earlier, I think it does still have the bones of a pretty good team. I think you can win with this team.
Yeah.
But I do worry like that some of the the decisions are going to be motivated for reasons other than
winning.
We're doing everything we can to win.
Yeah.
Instead it's, well, we're doing what we have to do to try to win. When I'm sorry, like again, all things being equal, and it's easy for me to sit here and say because it's not my money and I don't have to operate and worry about CBTs and all that other bullshit. But like, you want me to trade one of these guys who were so instrumental in building a 93-win team? Like, why do I have to do that?
I'll give you a tack onto that. Has AJ Preller ever been tasked with like balancing the books? Like he came in bat out of hell. Hey, we're gonna get this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, and then after a year or two, he's like, okay, this didn't really work out. Let's sell them all, regroup, and then we'll do it again.
Yeah, I mean, last year you can point to last year and say he was forced into trading Juan Soto, and he did the best he could with that.
Yes, but it's different when you say, hey, we got to do this with Juan Soto, a generational player, to like, hey, there's like 3 open spots on the roster and 3 guys who are about to be free agents that we're not going to let you re-sign, and you can't go above this mark. Good luck.
Yeah.
Like that's maybe he's got the skills to do that, but I don't know that he's ever been tasked with that.
So let me ask you, because just in terms of being somewhat responsible here, as it relates to where this is all going.
Yeah.
In the in the short term, there's going to be a Major League Baseball vote.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, do you mind if I say what your wife does for a living?
So I'll say it. So my wife is what's called a trust and estate attorney. It's actually not her job. She is part of the California bar, but she is what is referred to as a non-practicing attorney. She works for essentially a bank doing stuff that is semi-related to this, but she also works with people in her job who are not trust and estate attorneys. But she is an expert on things like trusts and estates. Yes, go ahead.
So I'm not an expert in any of that stuff.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we were supposed to have dinner a couple of weeks ago, but I was under the weather, and part of what we wanted to do was talk to Becca about, like, this is an area where my wife and I have been a little negligent.
Oh, you don't have a trust?
We do not. And it's it's a concerning thing, right? For reasons of Major League Baseball ownership.
Yeah.
And I think everybody who's in a relationship and everybody who's got kids and everybody who's worried, like it's something that we are it's ridiculous that we haven't done this. But that's a level of expertise. Everybody who I know is like, listen, what's on paper is what's on paper, and Major League Baseball is just going to not they don't care what's written down on a yellow legal pad. They just do not.
Yeah.
They're going to care about, and baseball is going to be incredibly thorough and diligent, and whatever it is that legally they see is what it is that baseball is going to support. So, again, this is very dramatic, and some of it feels a little icky. But in terms of the bottom line here, please.
The bottom line is, look, you scroll through that AC piece, and once you get to the handwritten note on the deathbed, it's over. Yeah. Like, if that's your argument, and there's no way to prove it, there's no video of him doing it, it's over. It's going to be inadmissible, and they're going to go.
And people that I know that have worked in that building have said that Peter had a lot of these legal pads around
he's having
where
fun.
He'd have concepts about trades and different things, and that's just the way. I have a yellow legal pad.
You have it with you right now.
That's me. I'm old school. I've always had yellow legal pads. That's just the way I jot things down. It's not the most organized system, but it's a system that works for me.
I love the idea that he's like, all right, I got to go into like psycho mode. Pedro's writing this note.
Yeah.
That was my favorite thing.
Yeah.
11-year-old pitcher Pedro, what would he do? But no, she's going to lose because the trust is laid out the way that a trust should be laid out, which is this person is the trustee. If they're not available or they resign, this person is the trustee. If they're not available, they resign. This person is the trustee. Now, I will tell you, John, there was a line in there that was very confusing to me. This is why I brought it to my wife. It was that John is not currently the trustee. He
has to get appointed by Matt.
Yeah, so Robert was the trustee. He was first. It's called successor trustee. So one leaves, there's a successor. So Robert was the first. He resigned. Matt took over as trustee. Matt is currently trustee of the Peter Seidler Trust. John would take over if Matt resigned. It said in there that when John gets, they're assuming, approved by MLB to be the control person of the Padres, at that point, Matt will resign and John will take over as third trustee in the successor trust. And I saw that and I was like, wait, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't be both the control person of the large asset that this trust owns and the trustee. That's called self-dealing. But when it said MLB has rules that if a trust owns majority portion of the team, that the trustee should be the one who's the control person. So I went to my wife and I was like, this feels like legally it's bad. And she was like, no, they're probably fine. It's weird, but they're probably fine. But this is a thing to consider going forward. John Seidler, as the control person of the Padres, will technically work for the trust, not the team. So because he's the trustee, the trust will have a thing in there saying the trustee earns X amount per year as a salary for being trustee of the trust. He cannot also collect money from the Padres. I think that means he might have to sell his minority ownership stake because he can't both be the person operating on behalf of the trust and a separate owner operating on behalf of the Padres. He has to do everything for the Padres on behalf of the trust, which means he can't just decide to blow a shit ton of money that they don't have and come back to it later and do it, because the trust tells him that he has to do everything in the interest of the trust, retaining money and value in the trust. So even if it's John Seidler running the team, his number one priority is not to the San Diego Padres. His number one priority is to the trust as the trustee. So,
but you can't be the chairman, if I've read this correctly. You can't be the chairman unless you have ownership.
Yes.
A level of ownership.
Yes.
I think it's 15%, but I wouldn't quote me on that one. There's just been a lot of stuff written about this, and yes. I think that's one of the stipulations of being a chairman is that you have to have at least 15% ownership of the club.
Right. He's not going to be chairman. He's going to be trustee of the Peter Seidler Trust, and then because the Peter Seidler Trust owns, let's call it 51%, he's the person that the trust is sending to represent their investment. That's what he is. He's not going to be Peter Seidler, who owns the team and has rich friends and can reach into his pockets. He's going to be a person that the Peter Seidler trusts to represent their interest and their investment. That's a different kind of owner. And I think that's a part of this. I think that's a big reason why they should sell. And I think that's part of what Shields sees coming. I mean, Shields' a lawyer. She's part of the California Bar Association, or she used to be. She understands this shit. And I think she understands that John Seidler, engineer, who's being sent on behalf of the trust to protect their investment, is looking at the books and going, yeah, guys, if we stay below this tax, we get the revenue sharing, and that's going to end up being financially the best, safest way for the trustee to retain its value, make profit, etc. That's what he has to do. It is his job as trustee to do what is in the best interest of the trust. This is her lawsuit. Her lawsuit is that the brothers are not doing what's in the best interest of the trust. If you, as a trustee, are caught doing something, anything, that is not in the best interest of the trust, I'm going to stop and say a thing that my wife said when she said this exact sentence to me. I don't totally understand. She does not totally understand Texas trust and estate laws. They are different state to state. If this was a California trust, and a trustee was caught doing something on behalf of the trust that was not in the best interest of the trust, they could go to prison. Like, that's a felony. So this is not going to be a standard ownership situation. This is going to be the trust is doing what's best for the trust, not what is best for the product on the field or the fans or anything else that the Team Shield people want. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think a lot of the things that Shield is saying publicly are probably true.
Yeah.
And I also believe that all roads are pointing towards somebody else being the control person here. So
you mean outside of her or John?
Outside of her.
Yes. And I honestly,
because that's the way the legal document is written.
The legal document.
And baseball is going to have a full and complete understanding of the way it's supposed to operate.
It is not an unclear document.
Yes.
It is a clear document that I want Bob to do it or Matt to do it or John to do it. Correct. That's who I want to run my trust. Not necessarily to control the Padres, but to run my trust. The person who runs the trust gets to decide who controls Peter's assets.
Right. And that's how they're going to operate moving forward from a legal standpoint, where it feels like a lot of the stuff that Sheila's talking about is, I embody the spirit of Peter here better than anybody else. We're not in a courtroom though with that.
Look, we'll reverse for a second, and then I want to see if we want to hit like one more topic. I want to go back to a thing you said right at the beginning, the 4 weeks ago when this lawsuit, 3 weeks ago, when this lawsuit was happening. I can't imagine. Actually, no, I can. I do sometimes. Imagine the emotional trauma that she's going through.
Yeah.
She lost her husband, her partner, father of her kids, and the two places that they spent the most time, the most energy, was dealing with the Padres at Petco Park and at home. And now she's at home, and my uncle went through this with his wife when she passed away from cancer a few years ago, and he said it is the hardest thing in the world to be home when the other person you made that home with is not there and is not coming back. He's like, it is a lonely feeling. You can't escape them. He eventually sold the house because he was like, every room I walked into reminded me of a time she was in that room. It's just trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And then she's got to manage the kids and how they're dealing with the trauma, all of that. And then you're telling her the other half of their relationship, where they went to Padres games and they ran one of the 30 teams in baseball kind of together and all of that, and the knowing the players and meeting the Darren Smiths on the field and all of that.
Yeah.
That's taken from her too. What's left? And I imagine what's left is some money. Be a lot more money if there was a sale and she got a portion of that. I don't know how the trust lines out that way.
Yeah, it's a great time to sell a Major League Baseball
it's
team.
It's a great time, and they should, but I think Sheil is acting emotionally. I don't think she has any legal standing, and I feel terrible for her, and I'm on her side. But the whole thing is fucked, and like I saw a comment from someone today that was like, there was no way once Bally's went under, and they lost the RSN money, the Regional Sports Network money, and then Peter died shortly thereafter or shortly before, I don't remember. They were like, those two things, this ownership group was never going to recover from, because the only person who could get you out of those stormy waters would be Peter. They got to sell. And honestly, the sooner the better.
Yeah, I mean, even Kevin alludes to that in the rather lengthy piece about the Padres potentially having the worst television deal in all of Major League Baseball, some of which is circumstantial.
Aren't the Twins doing the same thing now?
But some of these teams that got wrapped up in the whole Bally's implosion figured out a way to start cutting some temporary side deals just so they can get a little bit more money pumping through the coffers here.
Going back to local TV, it's
Why
great.
aren't the Padres doing that?
I have no idea.
I mean, for all the chatter about how great the business department has done, I keep asking, like, is this the best that they can do for television? Or are they just going to wait for Major League Baseball in a couple of years to sell a streaming package a la Major League Soccer so that they can tap in on a local level that way? Like, I don't know, it just feels like we're carrying on for quite a while here. That's not a throwaway line to me.
Also, why would the Dodgers do that?
That's not a throwaway line to me. Well, the Dodgers, their local revenue is...
It's insane.
So, but I think the idea is somewhere down the road that the Padres are going to, sell a streaming package with the Diamondbacks and with Cleveland and with some of these other teams that were part of that whole Bally's implosion thing. I think that's where this might be heading. But in the meanwhile, what are they doing? I mean, what are they doing? Why do the Padres, I think that's the question that needs to be asked, is why do the Padres have the worst television deal in all of Major League Baseball? When the building is sold out every night and the Padres tell everybody how great their attendance numbers are and how they've set another record and they've set another record, and they're investing money to upgrade Gallagher Square, and they're now going to do some new pyrotechnics off the top of the Western Metal Supply Company building, and they're opening a new Padres store, right?
They also have all the studios ready to go.
You're telling me all this stuff about how great the business side is, and again, I might be oversimplifying it sitting here in the backyard.
Yeah.
But, well, why is it that you have the worst television deal? I can think of some other teams that I would suspect would have the worst television deal in baseball. And to me, for as much as the business department seems to be credited with all this other sort of stuff that's going around, that is a huge failure, because your local television revenue is a huge part of how it is that you remain competitive in Major League Baseball.
Do you know?
And you don't have a deal for 3 years.
Do you know if there's any sort of numbers about number of people that have watched this year as opposed to the year before?
I don't, because I think a lot of that stuff, the number I had heard, which I don't know how accurate it is. I just heard that through their streaming.
Yeah.
Through Major League Baseball, it was a relative pittance, like $5-7 million bucks, something like that.
Do you think Jackson Merrill would be a bigger star?
But they're not sharing that with me,
No, I know. But do you think Jackson Merrill would be a bigger star in San Diego had they been on actual TV last year, as opposed to? I mean, I guess they were through somebody, right? Like DirecTV or something. You could get them.
Yeah, it's I don't know exactly which services are picking them up and which aren't. DirecTV, I think, is. I just subscribe. I just will pay the $100 or whatever it is. But again, if you're only pulling in a couple of $1 million here, and then you have to rely on the national money that gets chopped up evenly 30 different ways.
Yeah.
I just need somebody to explain to me why it is that the Padres have the worst television deal in Major League Baseball,
so bad.
And how that's not a reflection somehow. When again, these other teams that were wrapped up in the Bally's implosion, I just saw the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks were wrapped up in that. They spent $200 million on Burns. So, I just wonder why it is. And maybe there's a perfectly valid reason for that, but it hasn't been stated. It just it's just accepted as an unfortunate condition of the Padres in 2025 and the previous seasons before that. I would like somebody to expand on that a little bit more for me.
Okay,
but just for me.
Yeah, we're probably at an hour. We're over an hour. Do you want to hit anything else? I got 3 things that we can hit on, or we can just end.
What do you got? Should we do a lightning round?
Lightning round.
Before it starts raining on us?
Yeah. Do you want to talk SDFC?
Thank God for the rain, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I know you guys all the way up here probably didn't have to deal with the things that we dealt with down south.
Tell me what you were dealing with.
I literally had ash falling on my house in Imperial Beach.
Is the roof covered?
Yeah.
Do you have to sweep it up?
Yeah, well, now it's rained, so now it's just turned to dirt. But yeah, what do they call it? The Border 2 fire?
Border 2 fire.
Where's that? I don't understand that name. But
I don't know. I think it's because they had a border fire close by.
So this is Border 2, the sequel? Electric Boogaloo?
Yes.
So, driving past that for the last couple of days was interesting. Air quality was not great.
Yeah, and you don't have air conditioning. So did you guys...
We do not.
Did you guys feel that? I know you were already sick.
Yeah.
Were you coughing up stuff?
Yeah, we went out for a walk. You could taste it. You could kind of taste it in the air from Otay Mountain. Like I said, the ash got to the point where it was falling in Imperial Beach, which was a new experience for me. Thankfully, a bit of rain, and I don't know what it was like here in Carlsbad, but at least in Imperial Beach last night, it rained pretty good.
It rained pretty good. You know what the AQI is this morning? I've been looking at it because, with the smoke and everything, and I was like, the rain will clear that up. I looked at it this morning. You know what it was? In Carlsbad? 1.
Oh, really? We had 157 over the weekend.
Yeah, we got up to maybe 100? I think it got up to 100 2 days ago.
Yeah, we were about 160 somewhere in that range. When you check the phone, I check my iPhone app.
Yeah,
I don't see air quality is 28 currently in Imperial Beach, but it was at 160.
It's much better.
2 days ago.
28's relatively normal.
So that was weird. I was glad to see that thankfully a minimal amount of people were evacuated. San Diego is just such a crazy big county. It's so easy for something to be happening in a completely different part of the county, and somebody else someplace has no idea, just is totally unimpacted by it whatsoever.
I was getting calls. I got a call from my dad. I got a call from my uncle. I got a call. My wife got a call from her dad. People that don't live here. This is your old thing about people have no idea California. But these people were calling. I hear there's a fire in San Diego. Is it close to you? And I'm like, it's about 50 miles away.
Right.
And they're like, oh, is that going to affect you at all? It's like, if it does, we got other problems, man. The whole county's going to have to burn down for that to get to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy visual, though, just driving around and seeing, all the smoke pop up. Again, if you've lived here for any period of time, you've probably had some experience with it regardless of where you live. So, But thankfully that, could have been a lot worse.
All right, so I had SDFC, but I thought they were starting sooner. You said they're not starting for almost a month, right?
Yeah, they played a preseason game over the weekend. I saw some reports on their social media channels about that. So
Against whom?
Phoenix Rising from the USL.
In San Diego?
Yes. I think they played at their facility at Sequan.
They have a facility at Sequan?
Oh, yeah. That's like their headquarters.
Like at the casino?
Yes.
That's their headquarters?
That is their training ground. They have built. So Singing Hills.
Wait, isn't that on Native American land?
Uh-huh.
How'd they build out there?
Well, they have Sequan is one of their owners.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Uh-huh. So Sequan, the property, right? Have you been to play golf out there?
I've played Singing Hills. Yeah, I've played Singing Hills.
So I think there were 3 9-hole golf courses. Does that sound right?
It does.
And I think they took one of the 9-hole courses and they just said, let's convert this 100% into a training facility for SDFC.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Looks amazing on the pictures.
Yeah, I got DK.
State of the art facility.
I'm gonna roast DK. DK, who works for SDFC now. We were catching up, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to come check out the headquarters?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Let me know when you're available." And he writes me back, "Oh, let me check." And then I don't hear from him for a week. And then I sent him a text going, "Did you forget to check?" He's like, "Oh, right. Hold on, just give me a second." Nothing.
Well, they have 2 different headquarters.
Oh, do they?
So their business.
That's the training facility.
Their business offices are in Little Italy.
Oh, that's
beautiful building. I've been there. They've had a couple press conferences there. That's where they introduced a couple players last week.
Got it.
So I've been in there. They have cubicles, 90-plus employees, I think. It's a big-time operation.
Okay.
But then they have their training facility, which is where the players go train every single day. Imagine these players. They come to San Diego. They're like, yeah, it's going to be amazing.
Then they go to Sequan.
Happy wife, happy life, right? Let's go live in La Jolla. And then you got to drive out to Sequan every day. So,
again, 56 exists, 52, whatever the one that goes from like Santee to La Jolla.
Yeah, you're on a 125. Who even knows what that route is? But man, that's quite a bit. So then that's where they train out there, and that's where their academy is going to be. The whole Right to Dream Academy. That's a huge part of what it is they want to do in the future. They're going to build. My understanding is dormitories there, and classrooms, and all that sort of stuff. So,
not to bring everything back to Soccer City, and we can end on this. This is a question that I feel like you'd know the answer to. Part of the Soccer City proposal was that they were going to take over Chargers Park.
I think so, yeah. That sounds right.
What the hell's happening with Chargers Park? Just
SDPD.
SDPD took over Chargers Park?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've driven past that recently. You can sort of still see the outline of the Chargers logo on the building.
That's funny. Do you remember when there was the hill behind the field? And there was always like security guards roaming the hill looking for people who were looking
for Al Davis and his and his surveillance squad trying to pick up on whatever it was that the Chargers were doing.
It'd be funny if SDPD was just doing the same thing.
Did you watch speaking of football, did you watch the championship games?
I watched the first 2.5 quarters of the Eagles game until it was obvious that it was over.
Okay.
That game sucked, man.
That was opposite FC Barcelona, so
yeah,
I did not pay any attention to that.
That game sucked. That was just it was like,
was it 30.55-25 or something?
Yeah, but like they barely threw. They threw like 5 meaningful passes. Everything was just like, we're bigger than you, we're stronger than you, we're the best running back in the world. We're just gonna run every play. Good luck. And it was brutal. There was one funny part where you probably saw this on social media.
Yeah, feels like Lions-Eagles would have been a better matchup.
Would have been a much better matchup. There was one funny part where the Eagles were on the 1-yard line to go in for a touchdown, and it was obvious they were doing their tush-push thing where the center pushes.
I read about this. Yeah.
And it's an unstoppable play. You get 1 yard every single time, and so every time they have 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, they run it, and they pick it up 99% of the time. So they get on the 1-yard line, they get in their push-tush formation, and a safety comes flying down like he's Troy Polamalu, and he tries to time it, and he jumps over the center and smashes into Jalen Hurts. But he didn't time it right. They never hiked the ball. So it's encroachment, but the ball only moves like a centimeter because they're already on the 1-yard line, right? Or like half a yard. And so the next play, they reset up to do the tush push again. Guy does the exact same thing. He runs down. I'm going to time it. He jumps over. They never snap the ball. He smashes right into Jalen Hurts. And the referee goes over and talks to Dan Quinn, the Redskins, the Commanders head coach, and goes back and turns on the microphone, addresses the stadium, and he says, the away team has been informed that the officials can award a score to the other team if this nonsense keeps up, or if they keep doing this business or something like that. It was very much a like, stop this or we'll just take over the game and referees will decide who gets a touchdown. And my timeline was just nonstop with people going like, this referee's going to turn this car around if these kids don't start behaving.
Yeah, I read that this morning as like a little known rule almost came into play. I was like, what? I'd never heard of that.
I wanted them to let the guy do it like 10 times, just wear himself out. But Jalen Hurts probably would have gotten hurt. Chiefs Bills was great though.
Yeah, I watched most of that. By the time we got home, it was our anniversary, so we just decided we were going to go home and chill, and weather was shit. So I watched a lot of that. I enjoyed that game.
It was a good game.
I enjoyed that. I'm not as somebody who doesn't have any rooting interest whatsoever in the NFL, other than hoping for failure for the Chargers.
Sure.
And even that is as uninteresting to me as it gets. I mean, I really don't have the energy to sit around and watch that in any capacity.
I have one person
I don't. I just don't care all that much. But I don't mind the Chiefs story. I got to admit, like I'm not a Bills fan, so I guess because I don't have a vested interest in the sport and the league, it just doesn't bother me that the Chiefs are going back to the Super Bowl. If anything, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I've never seen a team three-peat in the NFL,
right.
So whether I do or don't watch the Super Bowl is a totally different story. But and I have a reason for saying that. I literally booked a trip to go see my dad, and we didn't even take into consideration that it was Super Bowl Sunday. But I don't mind it. I mean, I don't find anything objectionable about them, but maybe I'm in the
people
minority.
just get tired of them.
I guess there's a fatigue with all that. Now, as a Knicks fan, right, watching through the bullshit, the Bulls bullshit, like I hated that. I was like, man, aren't people sick and tired of seeing Michael Jordan?
Yeah.
And, I very much felt like I was in the minority on that one because I was a Knicks fan.
But looking back, you're kind of like, it's cool to see Michael Jordan do his thing.
No, John, actually it wasn't. It would have been a lot cooler to see the Knicks break through at some point here, beat the Chicago Bulls, and win an actual NBA championship for one fucking time in my life. Once. That's all I'm asking for.
Oh, no, the first championship happened before
1973.
Yeah. That's a damn shame. We should end on that note.
Actually, but I enjoyed it. Like I'm kind of, I'm like, yeah, it's a watchable Super Bowl.
It's very
like a repeat from 2 years ago, I think, or
very
something.
Very watchable Super Bowl. And I will tell you, I kind of root against the Chargers. The person I root against more than the Chargers is Austin Eckler.
Oh, he was with the Washington team, right?
He was with the Washington team.
Yeah.
And there's a very specific reason, which is that I produced his podcast for a season.
Oh, did you really?
Eckler's Edge.
Uh-huh.
Fucking douchebag.
Really?
Oh,
that's disappointing. I thought he was a good dude.
He puts on this face of like, I'm a good dude. I worked up for whatever. And there was a day where he needed to send me something, and he's like, I'll get that right to you. And I'm working, right? And I'm like, all right, cool. And like 8 hours go by. Actually, no, a couple hours, like 2-3 hours go by. I'm sending him texts, emails. Hey, man, I need this thing. Like, you got to send me your audio so I can publish the pod. And like, it gets to the point like 8 hours go by, and I end up publishing, I think, the podcast with like the horrible like Zoom audio. It was, and his internet was bad, so he kept breaking. And I was furious because I was like, the quality of this podcast sucks because he never sent me the thing that he was, and he finally sent it to me like 8-9 hours later, and I sent him back a thing, and I'm like, hey man, like for future reference, it's important for you to get me this stuff. Because otherwise, I got to sit around for 8-9 hours waiting for you to send it to me, or I got to publish something that is a product that I'm going to get yelled at because the quality of is really bad. And I'm like, look, I missed dinner with my wife and kid. My kid had a soccer game. I was like, I got to stay home in case Austin sends a thing. I was like, just try to be respectful of other people's time. And he writes back. I had been his producer for 3 months at this point, and he writes back to the email. He's like, look, man, I don't know you, and I don't give a shit about you and your family and your time. You're the producer. You could be replaced.
Wow.
And that's what he wrote. And I told my boss. My boss is like, you want me to get another producer? I'm like, no, I'll produce it, but fuck that guy forever.
Oh, man.
Fuck that guy forever.
Lit you up.
he thinks he's a fucking big time whatever. And I'm like, you are a replaceable running back. And the Chargers said it to your face. And then you went to the Commanders, and you're not even a backup. You're dropping passes left. I actually did have fun rooting against him in that game.
You know, and the moral of the story is, whether you want to take what John has to say, and interpret it however you want, or think that that's how everybody sees Austin Eckler. I will say the moral of that story from 25 years in sports media is you do not know these people.
Yeah.
Please don't think that you know any of these people because you see them at a press conference or you hear them in a couple of interviews. Yeah. Or you see something, you just do not know who these people are, and it's oftentimes a huge mistake to be like, he's a great guy.
Some of them are.
Some of them are.
Some of them are. Not all of them are bad, but
Yep.
some of them put on a face of a great guy, and then you get to know them a little bit, and they're dicks.
Even some of the ones that you think are bad people turn out to be really good people, like really, really good people.
Yeah, I think
and it's a fool's errand to play a guessing game about who is or isn't a clubhouse cancer.
Yeah.
You just do not know the answer to that question.
Unless it's Matt Lato's clubhouse cancer.
Well, I think that, John, we could agree. We could agree on that. You don't want to do any politics takes since we got lit up about our politics takes
I was
last
wondering
week?
if you saw that.
I did. I love a guy who's like, I disagree with your political stance, and you sound like an idiot. I'm like, I wonder if those two things are connected.
Do you see what I replied?
Yeah. It was very good.
I
was also trying to think, like, what political opinions did we offer up that somebody would object to?
Well, look, if you
like, hey, I've got friends who have a transgender kid who I was worried about going back to school, or people who now feel a feeling of vulnerability, like that I'm thinking about them.
How'd you feel about with the military showing up down the street from your house?
Yeah, I mean, don't love it. I got to admit, I do not love that. Is that political? I don't know. I just thought it was an odd thing. Maybe he objected to you thinking that Elon Musk was a Nazi. I mean, it's, I think that's what you said last week, didn't you?
I actually saw a post. I'll show it to you after we're done here. I saw a post on LinkedIn this morning from a mutual acquaintance of ours who had liked or reposted or something from someone else, arguing that no one has been a better friend to the Jewish people in America than Elon Musk. And to assume he's doing a Nazi salute is insane, because everyone else who's shaming him, they're actually the anti-Semites, and actually Elon Musk is the right one. He's the good one. And I saw it, I was like, oh boy, what a take.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of takes out there now, aren't there? Lots of takes.
There are.
Yeah, I was just trying to think. I was like, somebody lit us up for that, and I just drew a blank on what exactly it was. Not that I'm asking for clarification. I'm happy to move on.
All right, let's get out of here. We've gone long enough. We'll do it again next week.